All right, guys, so we've already learned about a lot of different elements, and I'm sure that's a lot of information that you're going to have to find a way to retain. Um, for the most part, the syntax is really easy to learn when it comes to CSS and HTML. It's the specifics that you really need to practice, which is specific elements like a video element, a div, a span, and then also CSS properties or attributes, and that's border bottom or position as seen here. Those are the things that you're going to need to really hammer away on in order to retain all this information. So with that said and out of the way, there's a gray area here where an element doesn't really exist, but we can make it exist if we want to, and that's before and after. So the main header here, it has a before and after. There's a partial element before it and an element after it, but they're not visible and they're not used unless we actually use it ourselves. So let's go ahead and say main header. We're going to put 2 colons and we're going to say before. Now this creates a blank element that didn't exist before now. It has no default styles. It has no properties assigned by default. So that's where we need to start defining the content. So content is a property that we're generally not going to use, except for right here, and it's going to be blank. And this just tells it that it has content so it can be displayed. And then we're going to set display to block. I'm going to save this and refresh the page. And you won't notice any difference because we haven't applied styles to it. But when I drop this down, you're now going to see a little before here. It has no width, no height. It's actually full width because we set display to block. If we didn't, it would be 0 by 0. And if we set the content to none, if I disable that altogether, it's just going to go away. It just disappears. It needs to have the content property set. You can even put text in here if you want. I'm going to save it and refresh, and there. We've got content in it. You can see it. But we don't want content in it. Normally you're not going to. Normally this is going to be used to further style the first the beginning there. So let's say, or it's going to be further defining styles for this element. It's just going to create an additional element that you can position differently. So let's say to the left of that text, I want to have a box that's 5 pixels wide and 80 pixels high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the width to, did I say 10 pixels? And then the height to 80 pixels. I'm going to save it and refresh, and again, nothing happens except, it pushes everything down, but you can't see it itself yet. So here's where we're going to define the background. In this instance, it's going to be black. We just want to create a black rectangle to the left. Well, that kind of screwed that up, but that's where we use positioning. So this is when absolute positioning should be used. You're going to set the position to absolute, and then I'm going to refresh. Oh, the whole header is only 80 pixels high. I thought it was 100. Let me change this to take off 10 on both the top and bottom. So the height of the before pseudo element now is going to be 60 pixels. There we go. We could actually go even shorter. Let's go with 40, see what that looks like. There. And now with positioning, with absolute positioning, and here's where I'm going to start to use the console, actually, or the dev tools. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to start adding styles to it through here. Writing CSS directly in the developer tools is essentially the same process as writing it within the actual CSS file, except you don't have to keep going back and forth if you're playing around with something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set margin top to 20 pixels. Then I'm going to hover over it, and you can see on the very top there, see the orange space that it created? That's using margin to do what we want, and that's technically part of that element, although it's unstyled. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to set top to 20 pixels. As you can see, it didn't move it, so it keeps it in the same position as 20 pixel margin did, except now it does not become part of the element. So this is an absolute positioning property. So is left, right, and bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set left to 100 pixels, and you'll see that it moved it over here. Now, if I remove the top rule here and the left, I'm going to say bottom is equal to 0. And what this does is it moves it to the bottom of its element. I mean, I guess you could look at it like this is a child element of header, although it's not child element, it's inside the header element. So this is the container of it, but it's not a child, I guess. It gets a little confusing there. But you can position it, left and bottom and top and stuff. And let's change the color so that we can see the text underneath it. And you'll see that it defaults to, we haven't applied any depth here. We've been working in 2 dimensions so far, and that's the horizontal and vertical, or the X and the Y axis, but we haven't even talked about the Z axis, and I think we should do that in the next video. I don't think we should do that right now. But this is, I guess, it segues into that. So let's stop here, and in the next video, let's talk about depth.